Hey guys, what's going on? I'm ShortySX, and today I have a very special video for you. But a quick warning, we are fighting one of the final optional bosses in Final Fantasy VII. So if you have the game or are planning to play it, I by all means suggest you actually stop this video and go play it yourself. The game is rarely awesome, I was shocked by just how much I actually love this game, so you should by all means play it yourself. This won't really spoil any, big story secrets or anything of the sort, but it still gives you an impression of what final endgame, battles look like, because I'm playing, again, the hardest optional boss on hard difficulty, and yeah. We'll be discussing endgame strategies and, the fighting system and all of that. But if that doesn't bother you, then by all means, welcome, stay, and hopefully you'll learn, a thing or two. Now, a quick also note, because this is a rather long video, and if you're only here for the final boss fight, as in the Pride and Joy fight, that boss, starts pretty much exactly at the 20-minute mark of the video. So you can feel free to, jump straight to there, but just keep in mind that I will be talking about most of the involved strategies in the bosses leading up to it, because I feel like most of the strategies you actually need to understand or, get a handle on occur before the actual final boss. In fact, I had the hardest time with beating Bahamut, which is, the 4th out of 5 bosses we're fighting here, so yeah. As in, the final Pride and Joy boss was actually, the first time I got to it, I killed it. So anyway, take that for what it is. I'm sure your experience might be different, but the point is, I would welcome it if you actually stayed for the entire video, because we'll have a fun little discussion and yeah. So anyway, we'll have time. Let's get straight to the first boss, which is, of course, Shiva. Now, Shiva is arguably the only boss you actually want to specifically prepare from, compared to everybody else, because she's also the only elemental boss. Obviously, being ice. Everybody else, whether it's Fat Chocobo, Leviathan, Bahamut, or Pride and Joy, they're all, non-elemental or have other things to, complement that. Actually, the funny thing is, if you have immunity to ice, that also helps with Leviathan, but anyway, we'll get there. The point with Shiva is, you see all of those aerial frost attacks she does non-stop. Now, those are incredibly annoying and deadly if you don't actually have, immunity to ice, which is why it's pretty much a necessity if you ask me. Now, of course, the way to do that is you get your elemental materia, you put it in one of the, 2 linked slots in your armor, and combine it with ice materia, which makes you get, a level of resistance to ice. Now, of course, the level of resistance depends on the level of your actual elemental materia. As you can see here, my Tifa has a rank 2 elemental materia, which means that all ice attacks are, they do 0 damage. She's immune to them. But then you might notice that my Cloud actually has a level 1 elemental materia, because he's taken half of the ice damage. Sadly, those materia aren't fully leveled for me yet. I, only recently finished the game, and I haven't even made it all the way through, all the chapters on hard difficulty. In fact, I'm only up to chapter 4, I want to say. As in, I could definitely have put more time into actually leveling up all my materia and my weapons and whatnot, but, I felt like I really wanted to actually do this while I wasn't, ridiculously overpowered. So anyway, the first thing, like I said, with, a boss with, Shiva, is you definitely want to make sure your immunities and all of that is taken care of, because as you can see, Aerith is the only one getting properly hit, and she almost died from that. The other tactic, which you definitely see me use on, pretty much all the bosses, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about, is to make sure you actually do enough damage. And the only way to do that in Final Fantasy VII is pretty much to stagger the opponent. Now, of course, if you don't know what that is, that's the little orange bar below the health, where you can currently see, that the boss is being pressured, which means they're being staggered even further. But anyway, like I said, plenty of our discussion today will actually focus on staggering. In fact, well, next boss is Fat Chocobo, which I guess makes a pretty good, case in point for how to actually do staggers. So again, the whole thing with staggering is you pretty much want to make sure that you're doing all the skills and damage that, maximizes the amount of stagger you're putting on your enemy. Now, the best way to actually figure out how all of that works is just go and read each one of these skills, that explains the majority of the choices I'm actually making. Like, every time you see me swap to Cloud and use something like his, thrust, focus thrust, or every time you see me use Tifa's, overpower, and, the consecutive little normal attack hits are actually what, gives you the crazy amount of stagger. Like, all of those are things you should get a sense of, because they all help you, stack up stagger that much faster. And the big thing with most of these bosses, well, okay, Fat Chocobo excluded, is that it's kind of hard to stagger them. In fact, when you get to, Bahamut, that's pretty much the biggest problem, is because he will rather kill you than let you stagger him. And you'll obviously have the same issue with many other, bosses and fights throughout the entire game. But anyway, staggering is rather important. This is also why I'm actually using Tifa quite a bit, as you can see, because she's the one character that can actually, increase the level of damage that the boss is taking. Like, perfect timing. Now that I've staggered Fat Chocobo, you can see that I'm using her triangle ability. So her, Rise and Fall, her Omni Strike, which is, the abilities you actually need to use your, Unbridled Strength for. And as you can see, the stagger amount right now has gone up from the default 160% to 260 now, which is why all her moves and all of Cloud's moves and everybody else's attacks right now are doing a ton of damage. So that's a really key one, and why you'll actually see me kind of jump to Tifa quite a bit when it comes to these fights, because she is amazing at actually, ranking up, like, not just stagger, but a ton of damage once you actually manage to stagger your opponent. The other thing you might also notice is that quite a few of the abilities kind of, work really well together. Like, one of the other abilities you actually see me use with Tifa all the time is Star Shower, which is the one where she, kind of does like a ton of, tiny little hits that kind of looks like her version of Omni Strike. Now, the whole idea with Tifa's Star Shower is not that it itself does a ton of damage, which actually kind of does, but is that it makes the next attack following it ridiculously powerful, which is why you pretty much always want to use something like Star Shower and then follow that up with another, powerful attack, whether that's, something like Omni Strike, or whether you use, Focus Strike, like one of the final normal abilities you get. It doesn't matter. The point is, that's how you can actually optimize damage. And again, so far, the fights should not have been hard, especially if you had, invulnerability to ice. Shiva and Fat Chocobo are fairly straightforward. But ironically, I'm like nailing the time somehow, because this is all improvised, but Leviathan, who we're fighting right now, is pretty much the first boss where you might encounter some more serious trouble. I have to say, at this point, he's no longer that hard, mostly because I think I figured out how to actually, deal with his attacks. But Leviathan can actually be a pain to stagger, because you can pretty much see that you only have, 2 hit points for most of his stances. As in, when he's just sitting there, you can hit the dorsal fin, as in, the middle of his body, or you can just jump up, to his head and smash him that way. Now, a couple of things here. For starters, you might notice that I'm actually underusing Aerith throughout all of these fights quite a bit, as in I rarely swap to her, intentionally and then stay on her. There's a very good reason for that, and it's not because I hate Aerith, it's rather the opposite. The thing is, with all of these boss fights, Leviathan is definitely one of them. Shiva had the exact same ability when she brings up her little icy familiars. The issue is that they all seem to attack whoever you're actually controlling at the moment. Perfect example is the spinning dive you see right now. Because I'm on Cloud, Leviathan will actually aim for Cloud. Now, Cloud can easily just block it, as you just saw, and he takes 1,000 damage, which is no big deal. But if you were Aerith, you take a lot more damage because, she can't block as efficiently. And if you do the even worse option, which means, taking your controlling character and putting him right in the middle of your other characters, that's one of the attacks that can literally just wipe your entire party in a matter of seconds, because it'll hit all of them, right? That's pretty much the reason I never actually jumped to Aerith, because aside of that whole, mechanic of the boss kind of targeting whichever character you're controlling, the issue with Aerith is she instantly gets all of this, like ranged attacks and pretty much things she's not really equipped to deal with. Ironically, her attacks are actually ridiculously powerful. In fact, you'll see me use Tempest all the time, which is like an amazing skill. It's just with a lot of these, bosses, they have pretty much like a counter mechanic the second you hit them with a long range attack. If you fight versus, the stronger Tomberries, like, the rank 6 match, which is pretty much the second hardest one in this exact same Shinra simulation thing. If you fight those Tomberries, I'm sure you've figured it out that the second you start, throwing any type of range attacks at them, they just cast Scourge on you, which pretty much kills you unless you happen to be immune. Or at the very least, it binds you. The point is, make sure you actually figured out how all of that works. And you'll notice that's pretty much exactly what I'm doing for a fight like Leviathan, because every time, he leaves this in level, position of his and flies out, outside the level, like now, he's preparing to do one of his ranged attacks, which again is why I'm swapping to, Cloud. You want to swap to whatever character is the tankiest and move away from everybody else so you're not getting everybody hit. Like, yeah, okay, here I got Tifa hit, but can't do everything right, The other little tip for Leviathan, by the way, is, obviously he's really weak to lightning, so that's one good way of doing it. But the other thing is he does seem to be, or some of his attacks seem to be based on ice. So the whole, being immune to ice because of Shiva and because of elemental materia actually seems to work in your favor for Leviathan as well. It doesn't really nullify all the damage, but you can definitely notice that at least a few of his attacks, are at reduced strength, which is, amazing. And for the record, with all of these, boss fights, one of the main things, I'll probably go over my entire setup right after the video, but one of the main things I really try to, stack as far as stats in terms of, the pieces of armor and the weapons and how you even spec your weapons. All of that, in this case, is kind of geared towards magic defense. Because most of these, their summons make sense, but most of them actually throw out magical spells at you. So that tends to help quite a bit. Anyway, the point with Leviathan is pretty hard to stagger, generally speaking, but here I got fairly lucky, as you'll see, because he's about to cast the, ultimate ability, Tidal Wave, which will probably put me in a dire situation at the moment. But because he's so close to staggering, I just, do a little bit of extra damage and you'll see exactly what happens, and the rest is pretty much history, especially considering how low, health he already was. Now, the only phase we didn't really see in, this little fight, because I did kill him rather quickly, is the one where he actually starts flying around the inside of the stage, and you can't really reach him with normal attacks, or you can, but it's not really efficient, so you pretty much want to just start attacking each individual part, whether it's the head, the dorsal fin, or the tail fin, and they all kind of, swap immunities between each other, but again, nothing you really need to worry about if you're getting the rest of the things down, because that's probably one of the easier, stages of the fight. You just have to make sure you avoid those pesky little water tornadoes or whatever they are. But anyway, arguably the hardest boss, at least if you ask me, Bahamut. Oh man, this has been my favorite summon in at least half of the Final Fantasies I've played, and if it wasn't Bahamut, it was probably because it was sharing first place with Odin or something. So I've always loved Bahamut. He's such a cool summon. But anyway, really tough boss fight, which makes sense. The few key things about him is you would think that you'd be able to counter a lot of his, attacks with Cloud. And by counter, I mean whether you're using the, counter stance skill, or whether you're just swapping over to, heavy stance and blocking, which, pretty much counters everything else normally. That's, that doesn't seem to work too well with Bahamut. Like, you can counter a few of his attacks, but the grand majority of his attacks seem to be, kind of element-based and uncounterable. And they do a lot of damage, as you can see. So the one thing you pretty much notice me do here is I keep trying to swap between characters as much as I possibly can. When he starts focusing on one, like, you generally want to move to somebody else. You also kind of want to figure out what all of his, abilities do, because, the aura damage is pretty ridiculous. Some of his other attacks are also, just a little too powerful to deal with if you are not quite prepared for them. And of course the big one is the one he's counting down for right now. So every time you start seeing numbers, as in 5, 4, needless to say, you really do not want to let that count all the way down. Now, whether you've played any other Final Fantasy or seen something like Advent Children, or just want to take my word for it, you do not want Bahamut to be using his ultimate ability. Because, yeah, it kills you pretty badly. So the thing to do, of course, is rank up as much damage as you can while he is charging up his ultimate ability. The problem is that Bahamut is actually pretty tough. As you can see, I've been hitting him for quite a while, and his stagger, bar is not that high up. it's also hard to, keep hitting him because of all the damage he does, whether it's directly to your character or the aura or all of that. So that's probably the hardest part. Every time I failed the fight before it was because, things just started snowballing out of control. Two characters will die, you start trying to focus them before you figure out what's happening there, you're already dying, or, he's pretty much counted down and is about to kill you anyway. And to add insult to injury, he also has another kind of, let's call it surprising mechanic, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, but you'll see in just a second. So, again, the main point with all of this, that's what I'm doing, with Tifa, that's what I'm doing with Cloud, is to put as much pressure on him as possible. That's why I keep using things like Overpower or Star Shower for the extra damage, especially on the following attack. The thrusts, all of that, you want to optimize it as much as possible. The problem is that, he does that. As in, at least on most of my fights, for some reason I feel like he wasn't doing this at first, and I think I almost killed him once without him summoning Ifrit, but yeah. He summons Ifrit, and if you're thinking, oh, this is probably like a, weaker, crappy version of Ifrit that you can just hit like once or twice, no, it's the real thing, as in, he hurts badly. What's worse is, even if you were to defeat Bahamut, Ifrit just stays there. Like, he doesn't disappear because his summoner, vanished. He's kind of like, oh, okay, now you have to kill me. Which is why when this happened, I was kind of faced with this, what do I do now? Do I go for Bahamut or do I go for Ifrit? And, well, I guess the obvious option was you have to go for Bahamut, because if, let him do his thing, he's just going to wipe me very, very quickly. So that worked for me. I'm not saying it's impossible to probably, swap over to Ifrit and see if you can do some damage there, but that's only assuming you can, survive Mega Flare. So anyway, the one benefit with everything you're actually seeing and kind of like the way this entire fight went is that throughout it, most of my characters actually, took quite a bit of damage. As you can see right now from all of their, limit bars, they're pretty close to maxed out. And that's not necessarily because, I was doing so many, wrong things, but just because the fight is, taking its time. You're standing in that, AoE aura around him that just keeps damaging you. He keeps putting out a ton of damage. And to be fair, even though my characters have died, just like twice or something, you can see that pretty much all of their limit bars are maxed out. Which is, if you ask me, the way to actually defeat Bahamut. Because if you're just relying on, normal attacks, that doesn't really get you anywhere. So, how to actually, balance all this out and make sure you're doing it perfectly, it's kind of hard to say. I would say the biggest advantage besides what we've already talked about is probably, the material you equip. And what I went with is, very stat heavy. Like, all of my characters have an HP up material, and if not two of them. The problem is all of them are actually, not even max rank yet. In fact, I think one of them is like rank 4 and another one's rank 3, and that's about it. But that's, that's one of the ways which you can actually, push that HP level. Also, obviously, with upgrading your weapons. But without sufficient HP, like you can see, if I had just a little bit less health overall, I'd be having a much harder time with this. Because the number of times he almost killed me with, just one volley of his attacks, yeah, should tell you pretty much the whole story. But as you can see, I got rather lucky. I managed to use both limit breaks from Tifa and Cloud and knock them, the hell out. But as I said, that doesn't really do much about Ifrit, so hey, here's Ifrit, right? The thing is, honestly, after you kill Bahamut and after you've beaten all the other bosses, this is more of a, oh phew, I have a few seconds to relax. Because, yeah, he does some damage. Yeah, he's fire-based and I don't really have resistances for that because I wasn't really accounting for it, nor would I, now that I've done it. But, yeah, it's not the hardest fight. Just make sure everybody's topped up. That's about it. The one extra tip for all of these, Shinra, simulator fights is make sure that you're not overusing your MP. Like right now you can see that I'm obviously taking like a very, careful look at all of my mana pools and making sure none of them go below 50% because, after the next battle, 50% of my HP and MP is recovered, and if it's below 50, then I'm missing some from the start of the next battle, which you don't want. But, alright. Hoo hoo hoo, time for the main event. Or, like I said, for some reason I actually thought Bahamut was harder. But anyway, welcome to the final boss called Pride and Joy. This is the first time I ever saw the boss. As you can see, I was even like, uh-oh, let's use the sets real quick and figure out, oh, no, never mind. It's not actually giving me any proper info. Or if you wait a second, it'll, give me like the HP, but that's, pretty much it. As in, yeah, obviously he's weak to lightning, and by the way, you just saw like exactly what you don't want your Cloud to be doing. Now that obvious, first ability is the type of thing you want to get out of, and I was trying to. The problem is my computer-controlled Cloud decided to roll in front of Aerith, and yeah, pretty much the opposite of what should be happening story-wise happened. But anyway, with Pride and Joy, obviously it's a mechanical beast. Obviously things like lightning are, a nice way to go, but also not that essential. The tactic you can pretty much see me, utilizing throughout the entire thing is to stay behind it as much as possible with, whichever character you're controlling. Now, the only really annoying mechanic with this entire boss, you'll see in a second, and that one is a bit frustrating, but for the most part, everything else is straightforward. Just like we talked about, stay behind them, make sure you're topping up your characters, make sure you're building up as much stagger as possible. An alternative way of doing that would be to go for his limbs, which I didn't really do throughout this match because he seemed to be taking, a fair bit of damage. I didn't feel it was necessary. I'm not sure, if I had crappier weapons or, if I was a little underleveled or something of the sort, maybe that would be a different case. But as you can see, the stagger gauge actually, it ranks up rather quickly. But here's the most annoying tactic. It's the catch. And honestly, it's an understatement for what he does because he literally just takes your character and keeps him or her for, I don't even know how long, but felt like half the battle. And since he took Tifa, that's, not very fun because that's my main, stagger builder. But yeah, obviously you can do a fairly decent job with Cloud. You obviously want to be using things like his Punisher mode because those attacks do a ton of damage, not to mention stagger. You can see that with Aerith, I'm also using one of the probably most overpowered / underused, at least for me, abilities, which is the Arcane Ward, that little flower, which is basically double cast. You get any character to stand inside it, cast magic, and it's just double cast, which, hey, can't argue against that, right? Doesn't take double the MP or anything. So it's a great strategy. Something you should totally be doing with, spells like Thunder or Thundraga rather, or Thundara if you're trying to, conserve your MP. But that's more or less the entire strategy as far as, I'm concerned. Because, yeah, he's going to put your character down. He or she's going to die. You'll see the same thing happen to Cloud later. I don't think that one is preventable, but realistically, you don't have to worry about it. His attacks aren't that quick, and, you have plenty of time, at least, in this battle. It felt like I had plenty of time to actually, revive everybody and stay on top of my stuff. But, okay, since we do have a few extra minutes, I just want to share a few, general thoughts as far as the game and just, yeah, Final Fantasy in general, because I'm not going to go into any spoilers. This is, strictly a boss fight, but I haven't had this much fun playing a game in a very long time. I will admit I even had, certain expectations because I played the demo and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, wow, I can't believe how much of a good job they seem to be doing. Like all the choices or all the little changes. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. I love it. There was pretty much nothing to complain about. And, being the skeptic that I am, when I picked up the game, I was still expecting for something to, I don't know, not rub me the right way. But, like, honestly, after finishing the entire game, after finishing, I guess, all the optional things now, and I love it. I haven't had such a good time in, I can't even remember. And we are talking about, a remake of one of my all-time favorite games in Final Fantasy 7, and, 8 and 9 pretty much share that place, but oh, this was an amazing game. Honestly, even just the fighting system itself, it's so addictive. Like, I'm actually more of the, classic turn-based RPG, lover. As in, if you ask me whether I want, this type of action RPG or, classical random encounters where you just have everybody, select their next ability and have it all be turn-based and strategic and all that, I usually go for the old school strategic one. But honestly, I think they outdid themselves with this game because it feels like a much improved version of Crisis Core. I don't know if you guys ever played that. Amazing game for the PSP. Tells Zack's story. Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, the fighting system is just, it's great. It's one of those rare, times when I feel like I want to play with every character, but I don't have sufficient time. Like, I pretty much try to use Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith as much as possible, but at the same time, every time I'm forced into one of these situations with, just Barrett or something, I'm like, yeah, this is so great, like Barrett's amazing, and like Cloud's abilities are great. The counter system with, his reversals and all of that when you're in Punisher mode, it's amazing. Tifa's punches and staggers are brilliant. All the spells that Aerith has, especially the, utility of something like Prayer when you start playing hard mode. I love it. What else can I say? And yeah, that was it for Pride and Joy. As I said, the final boss actually seemed easier than Bahamut, but don't quote me on that. Now, the big question you might have is, well, what was that item I just got for this quote-unquote hardest boss? And the only reason I'm saying one of the hardest is because I haven't actually finished the full game on hard mode yet. So a quick spoiler alert for a scene that's coming up after you finish this last boss. So pause the video or skip it. I'm going to be quiet for the actual scene in case you want to watch it, and we'll talk after.
Well done, Cloud. You've managed to fully tap into the potential once locked within you. Now that my research is at long last complete, I believe that it's time I told you the truth about myself. I'm not human. I'm a cyborg created to serve as Hojo's assistant. I was given knowledge and power beyond that of a human, but I was robbed of free will, bound to obey the whims of my master. But when we met, Cloud, I sensed something within you, something I knew would allow me to break free of my chains. By identifying and studying a subject with infinite potential such as yourself, I could adhere to the directives imposed upon me, all the while pursuing my plans for independence in secret. Your combat data provided me with the vital information that I required to enhance my basic functionality. This is the result. Through my research and with your assistance, I have freed myself from Hojo's bondage.
Cool.
I cannot thank you enough for your help. You've given me the power to finally live life on my own terms.
So, what are you gonna do now?
I'm not sure. It's all a big, wonderful mystery. It's nice, not knowing something for a change.
All right, I just want to let you watch that in case you cared about the story in that sense. But yeah. Anywho, so that was it. That's the ultimate weapon trophy. That's, again, possibly the hardest boss, and this is the item you get for beating it. As you can see, it means you enter battle with a full limit break gauge, and your limit break seems to rank up quite a bit quicker afterwards. Now, I haven't had much time to play with this because I pretty much got this and decided, hey, let's record a quick commentary because I have a lot of other work to do as well, but from the few battles I actually fought with it, it's ridiculously overpowered, as in you literally walk in and you can already pull off, one of Cloud's limit breaks, which means you pretty much kill almost all, not hard enemies, and anything else will not survive the second one. So clearly ridiculous item, just like the name, Gotterdammerung, like with German O's or whatever that is. But anyway, the point is, definitely an awesome final item. I'm not sure if I should really be using it because of just how powerful it really ends up being. But anyway, so to finish off this video, I will quickly show you my build, not because there's anything that special about it, but just so you can see, the direction I was going with. Now, this is obviously not the only way I mod all my weapons or how I use my materia, but for a fight like this, I felt it was pretty much the appropriate way to go. As I mentioned throughout the entire video, it's pretty much boiled down to make sure you have, enough health, make sure you have resistances to the things you need, and don't over-equip unnecessary things because you're obviously dealing with limited space. You'll see that I pretty much didn't really use elemental magic all that much. The one time I tried to cast Slow on Bahamut was the one time I figured out he's immune to it, so there's no point of even trying that. You might want to experiment with things like, casting haste on everybody, but the problem is because of the one playthrough I've actually done, I only have one of those magnify materials which let you, multiply the same skill to everybody or the same spell to all of your party members, and I want to use that for healing because it's so much nicer when you can cast one spell that heals everybody as opposed to like, yeah, I gave haste to everybody, it's pretty powerful, but I still can't heal everybody. So unless I use prayer, and prayer is great, don't get me wrong, but just because it needs 2 ADB gauges, it's not the easiest to use ability unless you're literally just keeping your Aerith on the sideline waiting to use prayer. So obviously having magnify and healing, much better choice. But that's more or less it. Like you can see, I definitely haven't even upgraded many of my purple materia. The basic ones on Cloud is pretty much what I've used the entire game, like Deadly Dodge and something like First Strike is actually very useful in quite a few fights, but honestly it's not the most necessary thing for a fight like this. The only materia that you might not have spent too much time considering is the ATB boost materia, which is the yellow one, which is ridiculously useful. Like the way I mostly use that, including in this fight, was to use it on Tifa when she's either close to staggering somebody or there's a lot of time until stagger is going to kick in. So pretty much just use it on cooldown or save it for when you're trying to burst damage because it helps. Same thing with Aerith's ATB ward, which increases the rate at which you're actually replenishing your ATB gauge. But again, that's not the most useful thing unless you're dealing with a very stationary enemy. And with all of these boss fights, none of them were really, standing in one place all that much. Possibly with the exception of Pride and Joy, but even there, I don't think it would have been that useful. So that's pretty much it. This was, this commentary went by surprisingly quick, at least from my perspective. I mean, 30 minutes. Wow. All right, I guess we didn't really have time to talk about the game itself too much. It was mostly just strategy, tactics, and how to deal with these specific bosses. But hey, I hope you guys learned something. I'll be doing an entire playthrough on hard mode with Final Fantasy VII because I was thinking about streaming my first playthrough or, making that into a video. But I ended up wanting to just focus on the game itself because, like I said, I love it. My enjoyment of the game, unfortunately, for everybody else, I guess, takes priority. So I just wanted to enjoy it, not worry with distractions or possible spoilers or anything of the sort. But now that I'm done with it and I'm playing it on hard mode, it's a perfect time to do that. I've already recorded the first 4 chapters. In fact, I'm going for a nice little, complete, get everything, make sure the actual, playthrough is cinematic and exposes the story and all of that, or I'm doing my best anyway. The benefit with all of that is that when you're playing on hard difficulty, it actually makes the game quite a bit harder. Because like I said, you can't regen things like mana, you can't use items. There are quite a few limitations, which kind of makes it a little bit more like one of those, Dark Souls or Neo or Bloodborne type of games where it's a lot more about survivability and planning ahead. And, there I'm using, certain weapons that actually give me much better mana regen and things of that direction. But anyway, that's coming up. Those are a few other little projects I'm working both on Final Fantasy VII and a few other things. Top of the list being Last of Us, actually. But that's all for today. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you found this entertaining and you stick around, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.